Speaking of teams, national championship contending teams showing vulnerabilities, how about Georgia getting walked by Ole Miss, and majority of the game playing with a backup quarterback who's what is Austin Simmons? Is he
Well,
17 years old, 18 years
not
old?
not the majority of the game. He was in there for that one drive, and he was awesome. He was
He was
freaking
awesome.
amazing.
He was unbelievable.
And Ernest was like, "Why are you taking him out? Jackson Dart looks hurt." But no, it's a big win for Ole Miss in this program. The rain was obviously the weather wasn't great, but the crowd was awesome. The stakes were huge. We talked about who needed this more, and it probably was Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss because of the investment in this season and how much it meant. And they really went all in, and how they thought this was a season where they can do some serious stuff. And this game puts you one more a big giant step closer to those realizations, those goals that you've been looking for. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what's wrong with Georgia right now. I mean, you can't run the football offensively. Carson Beck does not look great back there. Your offensive line, I know it's been banged up, is struggling as well. It's not ideal. It's not ideal, and your defense can only carry you so many times in these football games. And if you get down in these games, it's hard to come back. And I know the weather maybe has something to do with it too, but I think part of it's just like Ole Miss was just significantly better. This wasn't like Alabama had some turnovers, and then you once you settled in, you kind of came back and stormed back and almost won that game. No, it was Ole Miss, outside of the one fumble in the short field that Georgia had to score on, it was a domination. I at very, very few parts, very quickly, it was pretty evident, like, oh yeah, Georgia didn't feel great about their chances, which is shocking. Shocking.
Yeah, Carson Beck, dude. It it really is a bummer that Ole Miss lost to Kentucky because of all the teams like playing football in the SEC right now. Like, I'm really liking what Ole Miss is doing right now. I'm really liking what they're doing. They rush the passer effectively. They should have won LSU, and they should have beaten Kentucky. Like they are a couple plays away from being undefeated. And those two losses hurt because, of course, they don't control their own destiny, but things do look better after that win against Georgia. You have that tiebreaker. One of A&M or Texas is going to lose and drop the two losses. And then you also, Tennessee still has to play Georgia, right? I mean, so things are looking really interesting in the SEC, and Ole Miss is definitely not out of it. And I don't know where they sit in these tiebreakers because I've lost track, to be honest, because there could be like five teams. There could be five teams that are 10-2, and it's like, sorry, don't ask me to go and sort through all of that stuff. But yeah, Ole Miss is not out, and also too, like if they win out and say they don't make the SEC championship, does that also like are they still in after that? Like does the Kentucky loss look that bad? I'm inclined to say potentially, right? Potentially, but when I'm looking around other conferences as well, I'm not seeing a whole lot of one-loss undefeated teams either in those conferences. Where Ole Miss's wins might be just a little bit better, might just be a little bit better.
Yeah, the SEC, 8 teams have either one or two losses in conference. And depending on the Georgia-Tennessee outcome, you could have, 6 teams with 2 losses, 2 teams with 1 loss, and those 2 teams are going to play each other, like A&M and Texas, like you said. Yeah, to me, I go back to that Kentucky game, the Death Valley game with LSU. Like you said, you talked about teams that you don't feel great about in the SEC, you don't feel great about in the ACC, in the Big 12, or earlier in our other video, or earlier in the video. Ole Miss is a team right now that's playing really good football. And I think part of it too is there's a lot of transfers on this team. And I think they're kind of getting there. You're getting more and more in sync. The offensive line is looking better and better as the season goes on. And this was without Trey Harris too, who I think is probably their best player offensively. I think he's unbelievable. And so the emergence of Caden Lee, Jordan Watkins continue to play better and better. And this is without, Caden Prescorn playing a big, big role. So to me, this team is very, very dangerous. You're starting to see the expectations, them live up to the expectations of what it's been, what we thought it was going to be earlier in the season. I thought Lane Kiffin played a really good football game, right? In terms of you've seen sometimes where he's just uber aggressive in these games here, and they had times and they played true to their identity, but I thought he played very good. And we've talked about him being a guy that hasn't quite won the big one yet, but this was a big one. And I know Georgia's not this elite football team and this crazy dominant team, but this was huge for Kiffin and this Ole Miss roster, this Ole Miss program. I got to give them a ton of credit.